Hello and welcome everyone to our next edition of the Brosnan Pandemic Threat Intelligence Briefing. I'm Eric White, Executive Vice President at Brosnan. I'm joined today, as always, by Dr. Rob Darling. Dr. Darling is a former White House physician and telemedicine expert who's joined us on this panel many times in the past. Also joined by PAARMANN, who's our Chief Intelligence Officer at Brosnan and a former senior executive with the FBI. And we're going to share updates from our last session and what's been happening in the world of threat intelligence relative to the COVID-19 pandemic. And Dr. Darling, as you know, much has changed since the last time we talked. The crisis continues to evolve. We have information now that we didn't have in the past. There's been a number of bits of glimmers of hope. And could you just give us an updated operational picture of where you see the virus? We talked about the curve and the hotspots. Just let's start with an overall picture, if you would, please.
Sure, Eric. Yeah, I think some of the bigger updates that we're going to hear about here very soon. Well, one we've already heard about. For example, there was an announcement in the past 48 hours about a new antibody test that's was just been given FDA emergency use authorization approval. That would be this saliva antibody test developed at Rutgers in New Jersey. This is going to be really important because a potential a person who may have been exposed or may have developed the disease and fully recovered, if we can show that that person has an antibody against the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that could be a very important part of our strategy of getting them back to work. So the other, I think, big announcement is, the administration, the task force led by Vice President Pence and the president are probably going to announce here very soon guidelines that will be probably coming mostly from CDC about how we're going to start to try to get parts of the economy going again and people back to work.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Darling. I think that's what is on most people's minds now is we have a clearer understanding of what this disease is. We have some understanding of the transmission paths. We certainly know what state by state regulations are to help control the spread and prevent the over saturation of hospitals and being able to treat it. And now people are talking about how do we come back? How do we get back to work? And many business owners are thinking about what does that mean to me when I come back? What the phrase new normal is used a lot, and the analogy is post 9/11, we did things like take off our shoes at the airport for screening. And so give us a sense of what personal protective equipment might look like in a business place. Give us a sense of what screening might look like coming back to work. What are you hearing?
Sure. Well, look, until we get a safe and effective vaccine, we're going to really be doing a lot of what we've been doing. So all the personal hygiene things are going to be really important, right? The strict hand washing, the wearing of masks by the general public. Remember why we're doing that. That's behind the idea that if you are potentially an asymptomatic carrier and you might be shedding virus, by wearing a mask, you would decrease the chance that you might shed the virus to some other person. I mean, our whole strategy until we get a vaccine is to prevent the transmission from person to person. And this is why the robust testing capability is going to be key. But I think what we're going to see from the administration and CDC as far as relaxing and getting folks back to work is it's going to be a go slow approach first. We are seeing cases, cases are coming way down, but there'll be still social distancing and there'll be a lot of procedures that will actually have to be specific to the individual business, depending upon what your business is. And obviously that's not something we can talk about on this call, but those are the things that leaders and managers and individual companies are going to have to really think about and understand.
It's a great point, Dr. Darling. One of the examples of that back to work strategy is around the idea of screening people as they enter your facility for their body temperature. And there's a lot of newness to that sort of a requirement. We've done a significant amount of research at Brosnan to understand and be able to offer consultation to our customers about answering that question. We know that taking a body temperature is actually considered a medical procedure. However, the EEOC has relaxed those guidelines to say that screening in a pandemic outbreak is a sensible measure. Now, we also know that there are a lot of regulatory concerns around a process like that. And from the privacy side, that's an ADA concern, it's a HIPAA concern. The CDC has yet to issue guidance, but OSHA and your state regulations all play into that. So understanding how to build out a program that could potentially screen someone with a high temperature and avoid them from entering the workplace is a topic that many businesses are approaching. And we're quickly understanding and rolling out programs to our customers. But Dr. Arlene, what's your perception of the efficacy and effectiveness of temperature screening as a method to help prevent transmission?
So screening workers, customers, whatever, for a fever is a tool that we will have in our toolbox. However, there's some limitations to this, of course. So first, a fever, we define a fever as a temperature of 100.5 degrees Fahrenheit or greater. So if first of all, obviously a worker shouldn't, if a worker is sick, they shouldn't even be coming to work. But let's say somebody shows up and they don't, unknowingly, they are found to have a temperature of 100.8. They've got a fever. Well, that person obviously needs to be sent away, but they should be tested, right? So in this environment, if you have a fever with or without respiratory symptoms, you need to be tested to see if you might have undiagnosed COVID-19. So now, what are limitations? If somebody is infected with SARS-CoV-2 on day one, the average patient really doesn't develop symptoms for about 5 days. That's kind of the average. And the symptoms may be very mild at first. Maybe it's only, maybe there is no fever, but they may be shedding virus during that asymptomatic period. So that's why I say, if you've got a fever, you need to be tested. It needs to be ruled out, no doubt. Rule out influenza, anything that causes fever. But we do have to recognize there are some limitations to its temperature screenings, the usefulness of that.
Thanks, Doc. I believe that all businesses are going to be considering the evolution of the expectation of a duty of care, and they're going to want to consider this as a possible intervention strategy to help keep their workplaces more safe. And to that end, Bryan, as our Chief Intelligence Officer, you're producing very frequently intelligence briefs that are relevant and valuable to our customers and really the entire planet, actually, on where we're at. And Bryan, I know that this is one of those intelligence briefs that you have loaded and ready to come out, where we're ready to serve customers and talk about this. But in the rest of your world, Bryan, as our Chief Intelligence Officer, you're also looking at other asymmetric threats to businesses in the environment. Can you give us an overview of what you're seeing with the crime picture in the United States, with what you're seeing from the federal perspective and the things that we're worried about now at this stage of the pandemic?
Absolutely, Eric. Thank you. I think that while we're in this and looking to come forward, we have a bunch of different variables that are looking. And right now, from a crime perspective, What we're looking at is commercial burglary, cyber and online crime, and then fraud now and into the future. I'll take each one of those individually. First off, property crime. We have a whole bunch of individuals out there that have been laid off. The economy is in distress. Individuals are on the street. They don't have money for basic needs and services that they would require. Add to that a lack of police forces out there that have maintained or changed their policies and guidances about what they're responding to. Across the nation right now, we're seeing some police departments that unless there is a threat to life involved, they are not sending an in-person officer to that scene. With businesses boarded up and with not a lot of commercial traffic in there, that's a prime opportunity for thieves to take advantage of that. We're going to see continued commercial burglaries rise, and what they're going after for basically food, alcohol, electronics, money. That's what they're looking for during this crisis and coming out of it. Secondly, online cybercrime. That's where everybody is right now. We're all teleworking, we're all remote, and I think that's going to continue. We're seeing a large spike in people trying to put forth fraudulent scams online to draw people in so that they can steal their PII. Most of these are driven by phishing attempts, where individuals try and get you to click on a attachment or website, and they try and attempt to steal your personal identifying information through that degree, or embed malicious malware into your computer. As far as PPE and COVID-related medical, a recent study on an e-commerce site found over 100 advertisements for counterfeit or non-existent PPE that is out there. Another common scam is that you'll buy it, they'll demand money up front, you won't get your goods, but you have your money. And then finally, fraud, specifically financial fraud in this. There's a lot of individuals out there eliciting money for non-existent charities. There's a lot of people out there preying on the ability of individuals wanting to do something good. But be very, very careful about that, because those individuals are looking to take advantage of you. Now, going into the future, this is where the crime threat is and where we see it going.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that insight, and I think that's great for everyone to have contextually. You're also seeing a rise in some cases of domestic terrorism. And what are you hearing in terms of the active groups that are out viewing this pandemic in a certain way and potentially using it to forward their cause?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. That's a great question, because the asymmetric threat is one that we don't always think about during this time. People are going to experience significant life events and financial pressures, physical health concerns, mental health issues are driving. And then there's a other group that are just driven by misguided and radical beliefs. They're looking to exploit this crisis right now to their own benefit. You asked about domestic terrorism. We're seeing a real spike in the activity of racially motivated violent extremists, especially in the sphere where they're trying to push forward their own view of accelerationism, social chaos, which will then lead to the race war, which is what they're after. They know right now that there are soft targets out there that would gather a lot of media attention were they to be attacks, things such as hospitals, grocery stores. And they're actively talking among themselves about how they actually take advantage. We've seen some individuals talk about collecting fluids from fellow members, putting them in spray bottles, and attacking law enforcement and unsuspecting individuals at these places. There's also, we have to be very mindful about a spike in hate crimes directed against the Asian American community. This virus is associated with China, and thus there's going to be a spike there. And then finally, we're seeing a big uptick in militia activity because they see this as just a large government hoax. They buy into the conspiracy theory that this is perpetuated by the government, and they're just looking for an excuse to clamp down on the freedom to assemble, eventually declare martial law, and then go after people's guns and infringe on their Second Amendment rights. All of these across the nation are the asymmetric threats that we're worried about coming into the future.
Well, thank you, Bryan, and thank you, Dr. Darling, for the insight and the additional information. I know our customers appreciate it. And for all of our attendees, we at Brosnan are committed to continue to provide information to you that's available on our website. In our COVID-19 area, we have specific information that we package up in our Brosnan Pandemic Threat Intelligence briefings. And we encourage you to visit those sites and get the information that's relevant and important to you. We also host a series of pandemic threat intelligence briefing calls where you and your executive team have the ability to ask directly questions of Dr. Darling from a medical perspective, and also Bryan PAARMANN and his expanded team of experts from a broad array of federal backgrounds, questions that could help you prepare and recover from this pandemic. If you're interested in those calls, please find more information about how to sign up and register for them on our website. We thank you for your time. We wish you the best. As always, stay safe, stay vigilant.